about lots of history around coastal management for Maori. David Simon talking about public health issues and risks beyond heat waves, and then Brenton talking about the national and statewide processes on emergency management. Do we have any sort of hot questions out there that we can get our teeth into? This one there.
Hi, I'm Shannon from Adelaide. I've got a question for you, Brenton. Just about how the Zone Emergency Risk Management system fits in with the CFS Bushfire Management Committee. Is there overlap between those two?
That's been an interesting issue, that one. When we were aware of what was happening with climate change adaptation, we also identified that the Country Fire Service was pursuing a different path because of legislative reasons. So I mentioned our state emergency management plan. There's 10 hazards identified in there. One of them is bushfire. We're using that NERAG methodology and we're developing a system. CFS, as hazard leader for bushfire, is sitting over here working under the Fire and Emergency Services Act, reports to the Minister for Emergency Services, not the Premier who heads up EM, if you like, in the state, and they're using a different methodology. So we've been engaging with them. Certainly in the first few months we had a lot of people, as we've had zone emergency management committees for a while, but part of our project at that zone level was to reinvigorate them. And we'd go to meetings and people say, well, hang on, I'm on the Bushfire Management Committee, now I'm on the Zone Emergency Management Committee, we're not going to assess the risk of bushfire twice, are we? And the other complication, of course, as you're probably well aware, is that CFS operates in different regions. They don't align with the emergency management zones. So in some instances, the Zone Emergency Management Committee, to have assurance that the risk of bushfire is being dealt with appropriately in their zone, would have to engage with 2 separate bushfire management committees. However, CFS is still going to do what they're required to do under their legislation. We've got a state-level bushfire risk assessment scheduled for about the middle of April, and once we get out of the fire danger season through the rest of this calendar year, we'll do bushfire risk assessments at the zone level right across the state. So it's been a stop-start process. It's probably taken us 12 months to get to the point where we are now, but we've sort of resolved the issues.
It's working this time. This one's wide open, I guess, but we've heard a lot today about extreme events, emergencies, the climate impacts that happen at the far end of the envelope that hit us first. And it seems in this sort of group of professionals, there's a high level of comfort with the fact that having these events more and more often is entirely consistent with trend and is climate change related. But enormous resistance to that message at certain levels of politics and certain spheres. Yet it's also sort of pretty well known that those events are great windows and great avenues for communication and engagement with communities, and actually getting some action and some traction everywhere in relation to climate change. Is it perhaps time for a bit of a louder voice from the professional community to make the point that it's time to make the call now? It's time to make it clear that we can't just pretend that it's impossible to attribute anything to climate change ever, when more and more scientists now think there are coming out making a call with some specific events, particularly saying that that really wouldn't have occurred, without climate change. Like that run of heat waves for Adelaide, 07, twice in 09, and then another one, a huge one in the space of 4 or 5 years. It's like statistically impossible without some underlying change in the system. So, is it time to just make a bit of a louder noise about that so that we can get that more clearly established?
I'll just have a go from terms of talking to people about chronic disease. You can't shout at someone if they're obese. It won't work. We've got a population out there which has been influenced by politicians who themselves give conflicting advice on climate change. So hence, if your leaders are giving you conflicting advice, I don't think making a louder voice works. However, what we need to do, I think, is choose wisely as to which voice is being heard. I suggest that the Bureau of Meteorology's advice is often heard against, say, the state government per se. And hence, I would suggest, and I've got no evidence to show, but perhaps if the BRM continued to show and say and talk about the fact that the last heat wave we had was a climate change indicator, then perhaps that message might get through. But language is very important. And it doesn't matter how many times we tell people that fluoride intake reduces the children's caries, and my children have no caries, yet I have at least 12 grams of mercury in my mouth. You can't get that message through to people who are opposing you. Fortunately, they don't have much of a voice. However, in terms of climate change, we've got some pretty high-level leaders who do have a voice, and I think cause grief in this space. Talk to your local member if they're causing grief, please.
Probably just go somewhere. Yeah, when it comes to professional organisations, I think every major scientific organisation like this, Academy of Science, Technology and Engineering in Australia, the National Research Council in the US, the Royal Society, all the major credible scientific and engineering organisations pretty much around the world have come out saying what they can about climate change. I don't know how much louder they can speak, but regardless of politics, I mean, even in the US, the US Army Corps of Engineers, for example, is planning for and publishing a lot of information on climate change, how you should factor it into your everyday work, how you should factor it into emergency planning, regardless of the political situation. But it was mentioned earlier this morning in summary that we're very, very good at responding to disasters, but very, very bad at avoiding them historically. I don't know if that's likely to change in the near future.
Well, that's where I'll jump in on that, because I guess, and somebody was talking earlier on about multiple channels, so the message has been coming through from groups like this. The work we're doing with the emergency management sector and in general across Australia, is endorsed on high. We initially we're going to be limiting the scope of our risk assessments and making generic statements in our risk reports that regards climate change, so if it was a bushfire risk assessment, regards climate change, we expect the frequency and severity of bushfires will increase due to the results of or impacts of climate change. That would have been it. But now we're going to be getting the information out of the IVAs, and there's a lot of research underway to put the case more persuasively. So that data is going to be fed into the work that we're putting through up to bodies like the State Emergency Management Committee. We've got COAG that want reports on all this sort of stuff. So there's another avenue, another group of people saying, look, it is happening, and here's the impacts, and here's what it's going to cost you. I mean, all this has been driven, like what we've been doing, by the fact that governments cannot afford to keep forking out the billions and billions of dollars that we've had to in these recent years on all the relief and recovery. The intent is to put money up the front end and prevent, prepare, and so on. So we'll be joining the effort, I suppose.
No, I understand that we are out of time. Everyone's standing up. Can I encourage you, if you have any further questions, to just come and approach us at pre-song or during the dinner. But thank you very much.